It is good to see tractors working as they should. Here is perhaps the most popular pre-war tractor, the Fordson Model N. It uses a drag plough. It drags it along on wheels and the furrows are adjusted for depth. Other manufacturers produce tractors to a similar design. Here is an International 1020 circa 1937. Again, here we have a Case DC4 tractor from 1942. The Ferguson tractor with its hydraulic 3-point linkage changed the design of tractors for good. Here we see a later model Ford tractor with a hydraulic lift mechanism similar to the Ferguson. Oats were cut using a binder, which wrapped the oats into sheaves and tied them with binder twine. Tractors could also drive the mill with a flat belt from the drive pulley. The sheaves were fed into the top of the mill and the oats collected in a sack. The straw came out the end of the mill where it was baled. The bruiser is used to flatten the grain before it is used as animal feed. In the 1960s, the use of silage for winter feed for cattle became the normal practice. Here we see the forage harvester from that period in action. I hope you enjoyed this brief look at some of the farm machinery preserved by members of the Orkney Vintage Club.
Hello and welcome to my shed. The shed was built for to house and restore a 1965 Norton 650 SS, and it arrived here just about 4 years ago. Okay then, let's step inside and have a look and see just how much difference all that restoration work and money has made. Okay, so that's pretty unimpressive for all the work that's been done. So let's maybe take it outside and have another look at it. Okay, so cosmetically it looks very similar to when it first arrived here. However, one of the things I couldn't do when I got it was to put it on the side stand, because it didn't have one. Probably one of the most important jobs I did, and the most effective ones, was to change the magneto for the electronic ignition system. That's the main unit there, and then all the control unit is tucked up behind the toolbox and the oil tank in there. Another change is the Amel carburetors were changed to modern manufactured Premiers, Amel Premiers. They have better construction in terms of the materials and the jetting, so it has a more precise pilot jet, which means that it starts and runs easier and ticks over smoothly. Another job was to fit a valve to close off the flow of oil. This is to prevent what's called wet sumping, where the oil drains out of the oil tank into the sump, and then you have to drain it all out before you can start it. So to prevent that happening, I've put the valve in. But of course, if you run the engine with that valve closed, you have no oil. Consequently, I've put in this bungee cord between the kickstart and the rev counter, which means that if I try to kickstart the bike, it reminds me to open the valve. One of the things I had to do was to get a new rev counter and speedometer, because the ones that were fitted originally gave up the ghost on the journey here. So these are renovated items which are as new. Done just over 1100 miles on it since the refurb. Right, most of the work was done internally to the engine, so what I'll do now is I'll get some of those parts out and I'll lay them out and we'll have a look through them. And here is just some of the parts that have been replaced during the course of the restoration. When I stripped the engine down, I could see that the bores were worn. The pistons were already 60 thou oversize, so they had to be replaced. The bores were re-sleeved back to standard, new pistons put in. Well, the valve gates been replaced, valve springs, the valves, the collars, rocker plates. Both of the exhaust rocker box covers had to be replaced because they had a crack in them. The rocker oil feed, as usual, snapped off, so that was replaced too. Exhaust clamps never tightened up properly, so they were replaced. Carburetors were changed for Amel Premiers, which are a much more accurate and better made, better quality product now, so I get reliable starting and reliable takeover. The main bearings were alright, but I replaced them with what are called super blend bearings, because they have a curvature on the actual bearing, which makes it takes less strain. The oil pump was replaced to try and prevent wet sumping, and also to make sure that when it did get started again, it would have a reliable reliable oil supply. So all the engine bolts, cylinder head bolts, everything was replaced there. The grips, the levers, which were mismatched, the dip switch, the horn, all of the control cables, rev counter cable, speedo cable, they were replaced. The brake rod snapped, that needed replaced. Centre stand was very, very worn, so that was replaced too. Now goes on the stand with just a press of the foot, which is rather nice. Rev counter drive needed replacing. The bike was rewired, which involved also the ammeter, light switch, the ignition switch. There's a diode and the rectifier. There's the magneto, which was replaced with the electronic ignition. Primary chain. After spending hours and hours and hours on this clutch, I'll just get it a bit lighter, cleaning all the burrs off the plates, the case, the clutch body, still wasn't working properly, so I opted for a complete new clutch. The gearbox adjuster, the notorious oil seal for the primary chain case, the primary chain, secondary chain. Well, this was the old electronic ignition that was fitted Thor Spark. It was very awkward to work with, so I changed that for the Payson. And of course, old tyres needed to be replaced too. So what I haven't laid out is the old wiring, because that was just a complete rat's nest. So that's been completely rewired. And on top of this, there was a lot of other bolts, nuts, screws, various fittings which all had to be replaced. So all in all, it's hardly surprising it's taken me nearly 4 years to do it. This is to record the starting procedure for the 650SS Norton. As you can see, the engine is stone cold. So what we do is, first of all, turn the petrol on, then tickle both carburetors. It's easier from the other side, but I just want to stay on the one side. Tickle the second carb. That's both carburetors tickled now. So then you give it about 3 kicks just to get some fuel through into the cylinders. This is without the ignition on. Turn the ignition on. Check that you've got full choke. Bring it down to compression.
I would like to introduce my MG Magnette ZA. It was sold by Jane W. Tate in March 1955 to Edward White of New Orleans Stompers. He later sold it in 1980 to Alan Muir, who kept it until about 1990 when he traded it in to Ian Swanee. I particularly liked this car because it had its original BS number, and I bought it as a restoration project. Here is a photo of Edward and his wife Elizabeth Ray on an outing in the 1950s. Edward was in the Royal Navy and married Elizabeth in 1937. He had the distinction of an extra 2 6 a week on his pension because he suggested a modification which made torpedoes run true. Elizabeth was a sister to John Ray from the bookshop and was a school teacher. Here we see the car being dismantled for restoration. Fortunately, the chassis of the car had been soaked in oil, so there was very little structural damage. However, it needed several repair sections welded into the wings, which led me to the purchase of a MIG welder and to hone my welding skills. Driver's side front wing had a repair section under the headlight. It also had 2 repair sections behind the wheel. Passenger side had 2 repair sections, same, and a little bit of a weld above the headlight. The rear wing had a repair on its bottom edge, and also the curved bit inside the door. At some time, winkers had been fitted by boring a hole in the wing above the tail light. This looked a bit odd, so I decided to make a cylindrical part to weld on to match the tail light housing. As there was a rash of small blemishes in the paintwork, I stripped the whole car to bare metal with nitromorse. It then went up to Hatston Motors for a respray. The engine was in poor condition, so it was completely stripped down. It was rebored and new pistons fitted. New crankshaft bearings were fitted. The cylinder head was fitted with hardened valve seats to enable it to cope with lead-free fuel. A new clutch and water pump completed the job. This MG is one of the early models known as the tin top because the dashboard is made of metal and painted up to look like wood. The later models had very nice wooden dashboards. Leather upholstery has survived quite well and is original. I kept the semaphore indicators just for show after the winkers were fitted. Since its restoration, we have enjoyed using the car to go to events and rallies throughout Scotland. This one at the Mount Stewart Motorsport Classic was one of the first ones we attended with it. Then, of course, we went to Glams, which was an excellent event. We also enjoyed the Three Lochs Classic in 2013 when we went round Loch Lomond on all the nice roads that you never see as a regular tourist. Here we are at the top of the rest and be thankful on that run. Of course, there's nice runs like the Orkney Cavalcade, which we take part in each year. Well, that is the story of my MG. I hope it gives you an appreciation of the problems and pleasures of owning a classic car.